Welcome. Welcome to another episode of Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. And let's get right into it. So, the story of the mid to late 90s successful teams with the Indiana Pacers really began in 1986 when they fired George Irvine. The Pacers did. They were 26 and 56 in 1986, so he was gone. And they brought in Jack Ramsey, who had just been fired from the Portland Trail Blazers after 10 years. And so they hired Jack Ramsey for the 86-87 season. They go 41 and 41, lose to Atlanta. That was a team that had Steve Stiponovich, Wayman Tisdale, Chuck Person. Yeah. Vern Fleming was also there. You also had Herb Williams on that roster as well. Yeah. So that team went 41 and 41, lost to Atlanta in the first round, 3-1. They draft Reggie Miller the following summer in the offseason. And they finished 38 and 44. They were 28 and 22 through the first 50 games of the season. So they were 28 and 22 through the first 50 games. But they finished the season at 10 and 22. And they ended up 38 and 44 and missed the playoffs. Reggie Miller, his rookie season, averaged 10 points a game. And Reggie Miller played in all 82 games that season. And he started only one game that year. And ironically, he started one game. The one game he did start was against the Chicago Bulls. And which meant he had to guard Michael. Okay. Reggie Miller had 13 points in that game. Michael had 38. Yeah. Reggie Miller had 13. Michael had 38. So, and the Bulls won. So, but that's just an interesting side note to the 1987-88 Indiana Pacers. For 88-89, they added Rick Smits. Okay? And they also made a in-season trade where they sent Wayman Tisdale to the Sacramento Kings for LaSalle Thompson. So that was the trade that happened during the season. And the 88-89 Pacers had 4 head coaches that season. They had Jack Ramsey. He started the season 0-7, resigned. Mel Daniels took over for 2 games. He went 0-2. Then they brought back George Irvine. They went 6-14 under him. Then Dick Versace finally took over, and then they went 22-31. So they went through 4 head coaches. They were 28-54. Pacer fans didn't like the Rick Smits pick too much, so they were on Donnie Walsh about that. So they finished the season at 28-54. They lost their first 7 games, and through the first 28 games, they were 5-23. Okay, they were the worst team in the league in 88-89. So getting to 28-54 is impressive. Okay, it's kind of impressive considering the fact they were on track for a 20-win season. Considering how they started 5-23. Okay. So they come back in 1990 and they actually finished 42-40. They began the season 19-9. Reggie Miller went to his first All-Star game. Chuck Person was pretty efficient. 19.7 points per game. Smits upped his scoring to 15.5 points per game. Then they got kicked out by Detroit in the first round, as I said. And in 1991, under Dick Versace, they started like 6-4 team under Dick Versace. Then he was canned for Bob Hill, who led them to like a 30-32 finish, I believe. And they ended up going 41-41. Took the Celtics to 5 games. That was the Chuck Person, Larry Bird series, okay? Where Chuck Person talked all that head trash. And almost came out with the victory, considering the Celtics had been upset by the Knicks the previous year in the first round of the playoffs. Okay, so 1992, they go 40-4, 42, swept by the Celtics again, 41-4, 41. In 1993, beat by the Knicks in 4 games. So the Indiana Pacers of the early 90s never, up until 1994, never surpassed 42 wins in a season. Okay? Never surpassed 42 wins in the season. Since, they won 41 in 87, 38 and 88, 28 in 1989, 42, 41, 40, 41. So they were one of the most inconsistent teams in the Eastern Conference in the 1990s. Highly inconsistent teams in the 1990s. Then 1994 happened. That's when everything changed around. They bought in Larry Brown. They bought in Derek McKee, Byron Scott. But it didn't look good early on. They started the season 1-6 under new head coach Larry Brown. And they were 10-16 through the first 26 games. But they actually finished the season at 47-35. Made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, where Reggie went off for 25 points in Game 5 of that series in the fourth quarter. Then, of course, they lose to the Knicks in 7. Then they come back the next year, go 52-30, beat the Knicks in the second round, lose to Orlando in 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. Then, of course, after that, the rest is pretty much history. I know they had a couple of stinkers there in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Bulls and the Knicks. But 99-2000 was the year that they broke through. And for some people, that was kind of like the tail end of the 90s, of the great 90s Pacers teams. The 99-2000 team that went to the finals. That was the tail end of the great Pacer teams of the mid to late 90s. Okay. So, which is a perfect segue into the other topic. Detlef Schremph. He attended college at Washington, played for, I believe his name was Marv Harshman, if I'm not mistaken. Detlef Schremph. So in 1983, for freshman year, averaged 10.6 points per game, 6.8 rebounds. In 1984, he had help from another future NBA player, Christian Welp, who was also from Germany, just like Detlef Schrempf was. Christian Welp averaged 10 points per game. Schrempf upped his average to 16.2 points per game. Then in 1985, his average went down just a wee bit. Almost 16 points per game. And Christian Welp, excuse me, was at 13.4 points per game. He was drafted 8th overall by Dallas in 1985, which was the Patrick Ewing draft, which was the Patrick Ewing draft. So he was drafted 8th overall by Dallas. Problem is, the Mavericks at that time were loaded. They had Aguirre. They had Jay Vincent. They had Derek Harper. They had Sam Perkins. They had Rolando Blackman. And they also had Dale Ellis too, who couldn't get up off the bench, as neither could Detlef Schremph. Couldn't get off of the bench his rookie year. So he didn't see much time in his rookie year. But in 1987, Dale Ellis went to Seattle. And Jay Vincent went to Washington. Yeah, and Jay Vincent went to Washington. And so he had a slightly increased role in 1987. Still didn't see as much action as he wanted to. The Mavericks were kicked out in the first round by the Seattle Supersonics. He was second in 3-point percentage in 1987. He shot 37% from three. 9.3 points per game. And in 1988, he lost his six-man role to the eventual six-man of the year, Roy Harpley, his teammate, Roy Harpley. But he was still part of the regular rotation. Detlef Schremph was. He was still part of the regular rotation, okay? And Mavericks made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals, losing to the Lakers in 7. Then midway through the 88-89 season, Aguirre went to the Pistons for Adrian Dantley. Then they traded Schremph to the Pacers for the 31-year-old Herb Williams. Okay. So, he averaged 12 points per game in 1989. 12 points, 5 rebounds per game. And 1990, 91, and 92 will see him shoot at least 51% or better from the field. Detlef Schrempf was. And he averaged 20 points per game in the 1990 playoffs, which was a 3-game sweep by the Detroit Pistons. But he played well, averaged 20 points per game. He averaged 16.2 points per game in 1991, and he was voted the best sixth man of the year. Came back and did it again in 1992. Again, voted the best sixth man of the year. Averaged 17.3 points per game. And he averaged 21 points and 13 rebounds in the series against Boston, which was a sweep. So before the 1993 season, the Pacers traded Chuck Person and Michael Williams to the Indiana Pacers. And in return, they got back Pooh Richardson. So 1993 was the first time for Detlef Schrempf being a starter. He played in all 82 games and was an Eastern Conference All-Star. and he averaged 19.1 points per game that season. His first as a starter, playing in all 82 games, NBA Eastern Conference All-Star. Unfortunately, for the Pacers, they were kicked out by the Knicks in 4 games. And a month before the 93-94 season started, or more like a week. I think it was a week or a month. Can't remember. But shortly before the season opened in 94, the Pacers traded Schremph to the Seattle Supersonics for Derek McKee because Pacers management was a little unsure because Schremph was a free agent after the 94 season. And Larry Brown wasn't too sure about how Detlef Schremph would fit into his style of coaching, but went on to average 15 points a game that season. Of course, we all know Seattle became the first 8 seed to fall to a number 1 seed that year in the playoffs. But the Sonics came back strong for 1995, and he shot 51.4% from 3 that year. I didn't think that was real. A guy who shoots 51.4% from 3 that year, but he did. He averaged 19.2 points per game and was an NBA All-Star again for the second time in his career. Sonics were kicked out of the first round again by the Lakers. He averaged 17 points per game on the Supersonics team that went 64-18 in 1996. He did miss some time with a knee injury, but that was at the beginning of the year. So he came back and fit in just smoothly. Averaged 17 points per game. Sonics went all the way to the finals, lost to the Bulls in 6. 1997 was pretty much the same, averaging 17 points a game. And he was named in Western Conference All-Star again for the 3rd time in his career. Okay. So he averaged 16.8 points per game. Another All-Star game. Lost to the Rockets in the second round. 1998, just as consistent, 16.7 rebounds per game. 1999, he fell off the lockout season just a little bit. Then again, almost everybody fell off during the lockout season. But he averaged 15 points per game in 1999. And after the season, the Sonics offered him a 1-year contract extension, and Schremph said no. So he had interest from teams like Portland, San Antonio, Utah, and he chose to stay in Portland so he could be close to his kids. Averaged 7.5 points per game his first season in Portland, coming off the bench. He retired after the season because he had a pinched nerve in his back. But when Scottie Pippen got injured during the year, 2000-2001, he came back for 26 games. And then after that, he retired for good. So, Detlef Schremph, one of the best 6-man ever to play. Right next to, I would say, Kevin McHale, I would say. Because Kevin McHale was a pretty good 6-man his own self. I believe he was a back-to-back 6-man award winner too in the 80's. So I would say him and Kevin McHale, 2 of the best 6-man in the game that ever played in the NBA. All right, that's it, and that's all for Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. I am out of here. Peace. God bless.